This video should be watched after you have finished reading Chapter 5 of the novel The Great Gatsby. To check your understanding of the chapter, you should be able to answer these 7 questions without any difficulty. Describe the weather throughout the day when Gatsby and Daisy reunite. What does Gatsby almost break that belongs to Nick? How many years has it been since Gatsby saw Daisy? Where do they, that's Nick, Daisy, and Gatsby, go to during this chapter? What does Nick say about the green light? Who is Dan Cody? And at the end of the chapter, how does Nick describe Daisy's voice? This chapter picks up as Nick returns from his tea date with Jordan. And there is Gatsby hanging out in Nick's yard. He's in the shadows. He's being duplicitous, underhanded. Sardines in a box is an allusion to a kind of hide-and-seek game. In this game, one person hides and everyone seeks. And if you find the hider, you join him. The last person to find the group is the loser. Gatsby was hiding. Now Jordan and Nick are going to join him. Then Daisy. So who will be the last to join? Who will lose this game? White Star is mentioned throughout the novel. White Star is the name of the company that owned the Titanic, which fits very nicely with the themes in the novel. Nick agrees to help Gatsby, and in return, Gatsby offers him a job. For one, we know this is probably illegal given the confidential remark, but also it tells us something about Gatsby. He doesn't understand that friends do things for friends for no reason. That's a new concept for Gatsby. And what does this tell us about Gatsby's past? The reference to a trip to New York and Nick's suggestion that they take a swim in Gatsby's pool are pointers to the end of the novel. In other words, foreshadowing. Of course, the reference to the swimming pool is another way of continuing the symbol, the motif of water that drenches the novel. See what I did there? The day is here. We have rain, water. Could this be the rebirth of Gatsby's relationship with Daisy? Gatsby shows up early and nervous with far too many flowers. Gatsby's too much. He's over the top. He's wearing the white flannel suit here. How do you think that this will work out for Gatsby? Gatsby is so nervous that he leaves just as Daisy pulls up. Again, we are given a description of Daisy's voice. It is what makes her so alluring. People always ask why Daisy asks Nick if he's in love with her. Daisy doesn't think Nick is in love with her. She's flirty in a way that isn't meant to be inappropriate. Gatsby has disappeared from the living room. He has waited 5 years to see Daisy again. He's waited and waited, and here is the moment. And he's gone. But wait, the description of his knocking is that of a dignified knocking. Gatsby is always dignified. The description of Gatsby coming into Nick's house is all foreshadowing. Pale as death, plunged like weights, glaring tragically. How do you think Gatsby's going to die? And note how strangely Gatsby is acting. He's oddly uncomfortable in this situation. For 5 years he's been waiting for this moment, and here it is, but he doesn't know how to react. Time becomes a symbol in this novel to represent Gatsby's obsession with not just Daisy, but also with the past. Gatsby lost something, and rather than moving on, he has spent his time trying to get back to this moment. Note that Gatsby almost breaks Nick's clock, but catches it. Nick leaves Daisy and Gatsby alone, and when he returns, we see that Gatsby has changed in Daisy's presence. Much of chapter 5 is told with subtext. This is when a character says one thing, but is thinking something completely different. When Nick comes back, he says, "It stopped raining." But when Gatsby tells Daisy that the rain has stopped, he isn't talking about the weather. Right? When she replies, "I'm glad," she isn't talking about the rain. Daisy and Gatsby have reunited, and Gatsby's plan is in full effect. He has reconnected with Daisy, and it begins to feel that no time has passed. When Daisy asks Gatsby about living alone, he talks about celebrated people who do interesting things. After looking closely at the guest list for Gatsby's parties, it's more like infamous people who do nefarious things. In Shakespeare's play Hamlet, the character Ophelia has a scene where she passes out flowers, and each flower has a special meaning. In this chapter, Fitzgerald makes a point to name these flowers. We can surmise why and how they further his themes. Kiss Me at the Gate. This is an annual flowering plant made famous by Thomas Jefferson. Jonquils. These represent desire, sympathy, or the desire for the return of affection. Plum blossoms. They look like cherry blossoms, but are not. They are considered harbingers of spring, and they symbolize hope and perseverance. In Confucianism, they stand for the principles and values of virtue. Hawthorn is one of the most sacred trees and symbolizes love and protection. Did you also notice Fitzgerald focused on the odor of the flowers? Odor is unseen. What else is unseen at Gatsby's? His love for Daisy, his past, his career. Throughout this tour of the house, Fitzgerald gives us specific interior design ideas so that we get a clear idea of exactly what Gatsby's house looks like. His house is opulent. The library door is from the Merton College Library, which is the name of the library at Oxford University. If an author takes the time to name something, it's worth your time to look it up. Fitzgerald uses the word revalued about the way that Gatsby looks at his possessions now that Daisy has come back into his life. Gatsby is in awe of Daisy's presence in his home. He is completely distracted by her. When he looks at her, he shades his eyes because she is too bright to look at, like the sun. Nick says that Gatsby has visibly passed through two states. He is changed by her presence once again. Time. Gatsby has waited 5 years for Daisy. Now he's an overwound clock. The clock symbol has expanded to be Gatsby now. How will this change him? This scene is a moment of such joyous abandonment. Gatsby is giving a tour and he shows Daisy his closet. Why not? It's fancy. And he starts throwing the shirts for her. For the first time, we see Gatsby as a real person. And no, she's not crying about the shirts. What else do you think is making Daisy cry? It's definitely not shirts. Imagine you're Daisy. You're 21. You have a young child. Your husband is a cheating, abusive, racist jerk. You have no life except your money. You can't actually leave Tom and divorce him because you'll lose all the money and status. And when you were a young woman, you fell in love with a man who was supposed to be bad for you, who wasn't going to be able to provide. And now he's here, and he can provide. And you can have the life you wanted when you were 17. Are you crying? Of course you are. You're crying for the lost opportunities. This is the subtext. Daisy's a real person too, not just Gatsby's dream. Pause a moment over the first paragraph. Look at the highlighting in pink. There are references to a swimming pool, the rain, the sea in Long Island Sound. How many more water references do you think Fitzgerald can fit into one sentence? What could all this water mean? Is this a good sign or a bad sign? And often, people believe that the green light represents Daisy because once they reunite, the light becomes just a green light again. It has lost its meaning. But that isn't because it represents Daisy. The green light is hope. Gatsby's hope is Daisy, but the light is still symbolic for the rest of us. Gatsby believed in the green light. He always believes in a better life, a better way of living. He believes that you can hope for more than you have. Here we have the introduction of Dan Cody. He comes back in chapter 6. Dan Cody is an influential person in Gatsby's young life. He has pictures of himself from this time as well. As mysterious as Gatsby is, he does have a past, even if we, the reader, don't know the full story just yet. The weather returns as Gatsby and Daisy grow closer. As the day progresses, Nick begins to feel like the third wheel, but both ask him to stay, perhaps to keep things PG between them. The storm is gathering. The rain returns. Whatever is happening, the weather is ominous. Nick says that this is the hour of a profound human change. Who is changing? What change? Note the hour. Once again, time has entered into Gatsby's world. Earlier, Nick said that Gatsby was revaluing his possessions. Here, he is revaluing Daisy. He seems unsure to the quality of his present happiness. Gatsby has dreamed this day into existence. He's dreamed it for 5 years. And note, we're in chapter 5. And now that dream is a reality. Is this everything Gatsby has hoped for? Is Gatsby finally happy? Gatsby idolizes Daisy. He has decked it out with every bright feather that drifted his way. Could anyone live up to that? And isn't there a commandment somewhere about idolizing people? Lastly, look at those last 2 words. Gatsby has stored all of this in his ghostly heart. Gatsby is entranced by Daisy at the end of this chapter. At no other place in the book do we have as clear an image of Daisy as a siren. She has him. That voice held him. And her song is deathless. That means immortal. Regardless, Gatsby and Daisy are enraptured. Nick leaves them alone. The reader is left to guess what comes next. Chapter 5 is probably the most important chapter in the book, but it doesn't have much dialogue. And the most vital is that which we never hear. There are a number of symbols, motifs, and themes that you should have noted in your reading of this chapter. Add these colors to your color tracker in your notebooks. And think about the symbols that are used. The references to time and clocks are obvious. The shirts are clearly an important image. What can you write about them? References to water and the weather appear throughout this chapter. Write notes on the reason for this and on the effectiveness of this imagery. And of course, that green light is still shining for Gatsby. What else can you add to your notes on this particular image? This poem was written by William Carlos Williams in 1920. The painting, entitled I Saw the Figure 5 in Gold, was painted a few years later by Charles Demuth, based on this poem by Williams. Can we make connections between this poem and The Great Gatsby? Do you think Fitzgerald was influenced by Williams? On the surface, the poem is about a fire truck, but there are definitely some aspects of this poem that echo in the novel. The answers to the questions asked at the beginning of this video shouldn't have been too difficult for you. Let's see how you did. The weather is described as raining. There are clouds, thunderstorms, even lightning, and the odd bit of sunshine that pops out meaningfully every now and then. Your answer should describe how the weather changes as Gatsby and Daisy reconnect. Gatsby almost breaks Nick's clock when he knocks it from the mantelpiece. And it has been 5 years since they last saw one another. Gatsby takes Nick and Daisy on a tour of his mansion. Nick says that the green light has now lost its significance for Gatsby. Before the meeting, the light represented Daisy's distant and close presence, just the other side of the bay, so near yet so far. With their meeting, Daisy has replaced the light. Dan Cody is, according to Gatsby, one of his best friends, the man who got him started. We'll get to know this part of Gatsby's story in the next chapter. Nick describes Daisy's voice as a deathless song, a mystical, siren-like hold over Gatsby. What will happen next? Can Daisy leave Tom for Gatsby? Keep reading to find out. If you have any queries, please contact me on the email address that you see on the screen.